It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, and on the show this week, we're going to do some things a little bit out of order. We have listener feedback. I have a few thoughts upon viewing Revenge of the Sith earlier this week in regards to the sequel trilogy. Then, heavy spoilers. I'll give you my standards for what I personally deem is worthy of sharing on the show when it comes to leaks and spoilers. It's all coming up on episode number 150, brought to you by Embark, the all-original science fiction space opera epic about 5 friends, a boy and the girl that he loves, saving the world on the brink of apocalypse, written by this Star Wars fan, available now on Amazon in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. Go get it. More details later on in the show.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
Oh, Jabba. Why does she get a blaster and I don't? Oh, Jabba.
Because she's prettier than you are, A2. Hey, I just got an invite to be on Knights of Vader next week. Or whenever they post it, but we're going to do the interview coming up next week. I'm excited about that. I like Zach and the boys over there at Knights of Vader. I'm Jon Justice, it's my nerd world, and welcome to it. I think I said that before. A Star Wars podcast brought to you by Embark, the sci-fi novel that is available now, written by this massive Star Wars fan, who should be spending his free time finishing up the audiobook, which will be available right around the 1st of January, but instead, over the weekend, wiped out and wrote 4,000 words of the sequel. Yeah, there's a sequel coming next year for Embark. I won't give you the title yet. We'll save that for a little bit later on. But the first book, I'm getting way ahead of myself. The first book's available. I'll give you some more details of it a little bit later on if you haven't picked it up already. And there will be a sequel out next year and an audio book to the first book, Embark, available at the beginning of January. But you can go to Amazon right now and pick it up. Let's talk about Star Wars. All right, so this week, we're going to start off with listener feedback after a couple comments about Revenge of the Sith as it relates to the sequel trilogy. Then we're going to get heavy into spoilers. And when we get into the spoiler portion of the show, I will, I'll give you sort of my standards. I haven't done my standards for sharing spoilers and what I deem as legit spoilers versus non-legit spoilers, right? I think we all kind of have our, if you troll the Reddit pages, I think that each person develops their own little BS meter as to what you think is a legit spoiler versus a not legit spoiler. What I have to share with you this week is from an individual who I think is very credible, who was serving as an extra during the Jungle Doing That Thing With My Fingers set that we actually got some behind-the-scenes footage on. Then there was an individual who went to a marketing meeting for Disney and received some interesting tidbits about Episode 9. The second one, and again, we'll get into it, is probably a little less credible, but I do find it rather interesting what they shared. So we'll get into all that coming up, and again, we're going to start off with listener feedback, and then we'll get into the spoiler section if you want to remain completely spoiled free of Episode 9. Again, I don't know if these are legit, but I'm going to share you what it is that I read that I think sounds incredibly legit. So before we get to listener feedback this week, let's just start here with a couple of things. First off, I've been continuing to watch Resistance, and I've enjoyed it. I like Resistance, mostly because I like watching it with my 11-year-old. It's lacking in a lot of depth, but it's fun. One of the recent episodes, they had the Platform Classic, and that was fun just to see the different ships and the racing going on, but there's not a lot of meat, right, in Resistance. It's a kids show. Disney just launched their Disney Kids YouTube channel and have been releasing these minute-plus Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures anime-style little mini shows, which are really fun. You should go and check it out if you haven't watched them yet. What they've done is they've taken a very sort of anime-style, and there's probably a better word for it. I'm just going with anime, but it's a simpler type of animation. And they're telling stories from all the saga films using the sound effects and dialogue from the saga films. And I went and wiped out on all of them in like 10 minutes, right? They put up like, I think 4 or 5. They're really kind of fun. But this is clearly Disney's attempt to bridge the gap to the younger audience. And it really was a brilliant move to make these little shorts, the Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures, and tie it in with the original dialogue, because I think that's really going to adhere to young, impressionable minds when they get older and their parents force them to watch the movies like I did with my sons. You know what I mean, force them. It's Star Wars. You don't really have to force a kid to watch Star Wars, for crying out loud. The other thing I wanted to mention, real quick, is the one piece of new content that I like the most from Disney and Lucasfilm is Lego All-Stars. If you're not, in my opinion, if you're not watching Lego All-Stars, you are missing out. Now, I don't know if it's canon, but what I love about Lego All-Stars is the same thing that I love about Resistance, except for the fact that Lego All-Stars is doing it a heck of a lot better. It's obviously Lego, so it's tongue-in-cheek. It's a little bit silly, but they're giving us these really fascinating backstories and cross-connections with the movies. And I don't want to spoil anything. I just want to tell you, if you have not watched Star Wars All-Stars, go and check it out. We watched 2 episodes, because basically they have 2 stories for each half-hour episode. And there's I don't want to spoil anything, because they really are fun. But there are direct connections to The Force Awakens. There are direct connections to The Last Jedi. There are direct connections back to the prequel trilogy. So if you have not checked it out yet, it is quite honestly my favorite piece of new content, apart from, the films, of the televised content that we're getting right now. Currently, now that Rebels isn't running anymore, it's Star Wars Lego All-Stars. It is a lot of fun, and I am legitimately looking forward to the new episode each and every single week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
So I ended up watching Revenge of the Sith this weekend, and I'm not even 100% sure. There was a reason what brought it about, and I can't remember specifically what it was. I had watched The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones over the course of the past few months, and I think it was just kind of on my list of things that I wanted to watch. And I'd watched Last Jedi and Solo, A Star Wars Story, sort of alternatively, weekend to weekend. So I figured I'd take a break from both of those, and I watched Revenge of the Sith. And I'll tell you what, man, for me, the prequel trilogy just gets better with age. Really, another experience just sitting down and just watching that movie. As I say all the time, putting away all the distractions and just sitting down and watching it. And really letting it soak in and getting into it and getting into how intense that movie is. I will say that something popped into my head, and I haven't completely fleshed this out yet, so you're welcome to leave a comment. Understand that I have not fully formed an opinion on this yet, so don't come at me if you disagree. That's what I want to hear from you about, right? Because I love the sequel trilogy. I really, really do, and I obviously can't wait for Episode 9. But that being said, I couldn't help but wonder at the end of Revenge of the Sith, on Mustafar, right as Anakin is about to go up in flames, and we get that amazing gut-wrenching moment, "You were the chosen one." It said you would destroy the Sith, not join them, right? You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Something popped into my mind. And what popped into my mind and what I'm curious to hear about from you is whether or not the lack of a prophecy in the sequel trilogy hinders the sequel trilogy at all. One can make an argument that we really didn't get into the prophecy in the original trilogy, right? We certainly did in the prequel trilogy, but there was nothing leaning towards Rey necessarily having to come to fruition, right? It was just a circumstance of this resurgence of this Force awakening happening. Now, JJ could very well play with that, and I've toyed with the idea and did a whole episode with our producer Samantha for my weekly radio show on Twin Cities News Talk, which you can go to twincitiesnewstalk.com or find Justice and Drew on the iHeartRadio app. But that, I wonder, you talk about Yoda in Revenge of the Sith saying a missed prophecy we read, if we were going to get sort of a change in the prophecy, meaning like in the Matrix where A1 pops up to continue to provide balance and this kind of thing. Or if Episode 9 is going to end in the culmination of Rey and Kylo Ren, Ben Solo bringing balance to the Force finally after 9 films. Which, by the way, really plays into one of the potential spoilers, inside information that I have a little bit later on in the show. Now, I haven't, and again, I love these movies. I'm not saying for me personally it diminishes anything. I know in the original trilogy, as a kid, I really grabbed onto the idea that the only way that Luke could become a Jedi was by facing his father again. I know that wasn't necessarily as literal as they made it to seem in the movie, but as a kid, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Luke will never become a Jedi unless he faces Vader again. And as a kid going, that has to happen. Even though I think in retrospect that was a little bit more open, than what was actually laid out. That wasn't quite as literal as Obi-Wan had said in Return of the Jedi. So I'd be curious to hear from you. If the lack of a specific prophecy when it comes to the sequel trilogy hinders that trilogy at all for you, diminishes any of your enjoyment for it. I will say, and I'm going to talk more about this at length on next week's show, the one thing I did think about, though, is that it does really elevate that relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey. And I do think that's another reason why so many people on a subconscious level, probably never admit it, had such a hard time with The Last Jedi, because it was less about prophecy and it was more about relationships and connections with people. And sometimes people just don't feel very, comfortable about that. So drop me an email, talkshownerd at gmail.com. And or leave a post on YouTube and let me know what you think. Is the lack of a prophecy, right? Sort of an outside design of something having to be fulfilled, missing from the sequel trilogy. Does that hurt it at all? Hinder it at all? Do you think it's something that J.J. Abrams will toy with in Episode 9?
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, a couple of listener feedback responses this week from you. Thank you so much for leaving a comment on YouTube and emailing me, talkshownerd at gmail.com. Where have some of you regulars been, by the way? You know who you are. Some of you regulars have gone quiet, and I wonder if you're no longer listening to my show. And if you're not, I'm sad. Talkshownerd at gmail.com. Write me an email. Comment on one of my shows. Let me know you're still out there, because without you, I'm nothing. No, and there wasn't a ton of feedback this week. I know it's that time of the year, and not everybody always has time to email, but just some of my regulars I haven't heard from in a while, and I'm wondering if maybe they went and read my book and go, oh my gosh, I hate it. I'm never listening to John's show again. All right, let's start off first with Rupert Natman writes this. In regards to last week's show, as a replacement to a Christmas Star Wars film, I'm looking forward to Peter Jackson's produced Mortal Engines. If it's anywhere near the quality of the book, it should be worth a watch. As an extra enticement for Star Wars fans, the book and film both start with an homage to the iconic opening sequence of A New Hope. Rupert, I am with you 100%. I cannot tell you how excited I am for Mortal Engines. And I don't know if it's because we don't have a Star Wars film. I don't know if it's because I'm really, really into world building and science fiction because of my work on my book Embark, which I think is a big part of it. I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated by the creative process, but this movie being so fresh and new and different, I'm really excited to see it. And every trailer that I see for Mortal Engines just looks better and better and better. I'm jacked to see that movie, so I'm absolutely with you. All right, friend of the show, Black-Eyed Lily writes this, and I hadn't even thought about that, and it raises another question, but I think your commentator, because we had a comment last week in regards to the Rey lightsaber, which we have some more leaked information about that we'll share, being yellow. And I likened that to the yellow lightsaber that Luke had on the action figure when it was first released, the original Luke Skywalker action figure, and also the first lightsaber toy that we had as kids being yellow. Black-Eyed Lily writes this, I think your commentator would like to see Rey with a double-bladed yellow lightsaber because that is what Bastila Shan wielded. So many people see parallels between Kylo and Rey and Revan and Bastila, not only in their story but in their appearances. So Rey wielding a similar lightsaber would be another nod to this. I also think it's interesting that Revan's story seems to be creeping into the new canon. From Malachor and the associated cross-guard lightsaber showing up in Rebels, to Luke having a fragment of a red kyber crystal from a Jedi Crusader in his hut, to Octo, to the introduction of Revan in a new video game, they seem to be bringing the story back. That's a really interesting observation. And I can't help but wonder if that yellow lightsaber, double-bladed because of what we saw in the prequels, but was yellow because of the toy, which I originally thought that's what the commentator was referring to. Yeah, and I see those paralleled to Revan too. And I know that Revan was supposed to make an appearance in the. Did he make an appearance like in a flashback scene in Clone Wars? I know he was supposed to. But as always, Black-Eyed Lily, thank you so much for the contact. All right, next up on the listener feedback is a friend of the show, Benjamin Kent, and he writes this. Sorry if you've mentioned this in your show already and I missed it, but what are your thoughts on what a good age is to introduce your kids to Star Wars? I have a 4-year-old who could read the word Star Wars before he turned 2. Part of that might have to do with the TFA coming out a year after he was born. Sometimes I wish I'd kept it from him more so that he could discover it for himself when he got a little older, but we do have a lot of fun watching it together and talking about it. And now with Resistance, there's another reason for an even younger age group to get into it, more so than Clone Wars or Rebels. Anyways, what do you think? When did you expose your kids to Star Wars? Would you have done it differently given the choice? Thank you. Really enjoy the podcast, Ben. This is going to sound like a bad answer because you're asking a very specific question. It really just depends on the kid. I'm with you that I feel like I had done things differently with the boys in Star Wars, but Logan really likes Star Wars. But I think each kid is going to gravitate towards what their own likes are. You know, all my boys love Star Wars, but not quite in the same way that I do. Logan found like his own Star Wars in the movie Interstellar. My youngest, Kyle, who'll be 12 here in a few weeks, was watching Revenge of the Sith with me. And I think he's seen all the movies in one way, shape, or form, but doesn't really follow them through, right? I don't think he's ever just sat down and we've just watched them. But I know that when it came to the turn of Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader, spoiler alert, that he left the room. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. Doesn't like watching Lord of the Rings either. So it really just depends on your kid and what they're into. You know, I would always personally say, obviously, start with the original trilogy. And the original Star Wars, I mean, you could start any kid with that. It's pretty easy to follow. But, you know, in terms of wishing that you had done it a different way, I don't know. Man, I'm such a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, that, you know, a kid discovering Star Wars through his dad and not discovering, or mom and not discovering it on their own, if that's the way they ended up finding out, they'll end up finding their own, you know, their own stories about that in ways that you saw it for the first time and I saw it for the first time in the theaters. So I would just say that I think it's different for every kid. However, the order of release, I will say, is important. You know, I think that the younger they are, you start them with the original trilogy. As they get a little older, you go back to the prequel trilogy. kind of figure out what you want to do with Revenge of the Sith, and then you introduce him to the sequel trilogy, if only because the sequel trilogy has quite a bit more depth to it, especially with The Last Jedi, right? We're getting into some deeper themes there, and I'm not sure that movie is really going to have a sort of a wide-ranging appeal for a younger audience. Would I have done it differently? Probably not. I am planning on trying to get Kyle to sit down and watch all the movies in order eventually. Like right now, we're working through the X-Men movies, and he's never seen them before. So every weekend, we're just picking out an X-Men movie. And I know that when we watch Star Wars, he kind of goes, oh, I think I've seen that. But he doesn't have any sort of through line or thought process that says he's seen them all. So there's my really convoluted answer. Really all depends on your kid. You do what you think is best, for you're their parent. All right, let's move on to the real fun stuff.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
All right, so like I said earlier, we all, I assume, have our sort of own set of standards as to how legit we feel like leaks are, right? And I only share the stuff on the show. We're going to get in some pretty heavy spoilers here, so I'm just letting you know ahead of time. If you don't want to know anything or potentially be spoiled, then turn away. Go buy Embark, available now on Amazon. It's a really fun adventure. The reviews have been great. So happy that people seem to be enjoying it. As you know, I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and that's where my desire to write this book came from. Ebook, paperback, Kindle Unlimited on Amazon right now. I think it's $13.99 for the paperback and $2.99 for the ebook, free on Kindle Unlimited. Go get it. And I'll talk to you again next week. All right, for those of you that are still here,
the hyperdrive is leaking.
That's right. It's leaked all over the place, and now we're going to go ahead and pick it up and share it with you. So, I basically read through these threads and read from the individual posting the leaks and determine on my own what I feel are legitimate leaks based off of what they've written, what kind of background they've given, and what they've posted before in the past. Okay, so the first one here comes from an individual on Reddit who, and I'm not going to bother with their names because they're anonymous anyways, but there's an individual on Reddit, and this was on the speculation page, who said that, and I'll read this to you here in a moment, he was at this recent event and was able to share some information. It was a marketing event talking about their upcoming shows and what they have planned. And so there's some Mandalorian stuff in there. He said that he was told in this marketing meeting that the Mandalorian was going to come in contact with a child, and that the child was going to become part of the story, the core of the story of what this Mandalorian was going to do with the child, and that his Mandalorian armor would change throughout the show. So I really want to focus on the saga films for this, and maybe I'll share the other stuff with you in another episode. But he did say that he had some information that he was able to glean about Episode 9. And if you look back at the poster's comments from prior, he actually did have some legitimate leaks about some Marvel Cinematic Universe films and marketing, private marketing meetings for those movies. So that's where I felt there was some credibility here. But this is what he had to write. He said, Episode 9. So plot info was pretty much non-existent here. They only mentioned that it takes place about a year after The Last Jedi. They talked about the culmination of the movie being a battle between Rey and Kylo. They did show a ton of artwork, planets, and characters. They said Kylo has his helmet back and that it's been put back together with some kind of red adhesive. It kind of looked cool with the red lines going through it. They also talked about Rey's lightsaber and how it's back and has been reforged. They said the reforge is not shown on screen. There's a new droid. Its name is Dio, and it's sort of a sidekick to BB-8. It's little and has sort of a cone-shaped head, kind of like a megaphone shape, if you can picture it. It sounds an awful lot like the droid that's in the Battlefront 2 campaign for Iden Versio. That's what a lot of people are likening it to. Somebody, I think, shared a photo of that droid from Battlefront 2, and he said it didn't look like that, but that's kind of what I was picturing just in terms of utility. Beyond that, it was just a lot of artwork and toy packaging. They mentioned various new planet terrains, but the only one I remember was some kind of jungle planet. Anyway, I wish I could remember more details, but this was a little while ago, and I just found this subreddit recently. All right, so look, I'm not going to extrapolate a ton. If you want to go and read the comments, go to the speculation subreddits page. Or actually, no, I take that back. It's actually on the Reddit Leaks page, now that I think about it. And you can see the commentary there. He seemed legit. I have some questions. The lightsaber seems to match what we know from the guy who was at the Wadi Rummy Jordan set, which Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams this past week talked about, that they were actually there shooting Star Wars. So that's full confirmation that they did shoot Star Wars there. I'm still somewhat convinced that locale is that particular locale happens to be a Jeddah, although I did start to think that maybe it was Geonosis, which I thought was interesting. Be that as it may. So his comment about the reforged lightsaber seems interesting. Okay. The helmet for Kylo Ren, right? I mean, it's oddly specific for somebody making something up. That helmet seemed pretty trashed. So, you know, if that's even possible, I'd be very curious to see it happen. But I just felt that was a very interesting, legit sort of leak. And the type of stuff that we'll be able to get somewhat confirmation soon. I mean, I imagine that if there's a makeshift Kylo Ren helmet patched together, that's definitely going to be used for marketing. And it'll probably one of the first things that we end up seeing when the eventual marketing does roll out. All right, so next is a lot of details coming from an individual who went through the ringer in the Reddit page. And most people have found him to be very credible. I basically cut and pasted a bunch of his comments, so I'll read them to you and then provide a little bit of commentary as we work through it, all right? Hi, Star Wars Leaks community. I have some juicy info on the current untitled Star Wars Episode 9. I performed as an extra for 2 scenes at Pinewood Studios that I'm sure you'll love to hear about. We were a guerrilla militia in a secret-type bunker on the planet of Batuu. So that would make all the sense in the world. And a lot of people have been speculating that some of the behind-the-scenes footage that we've seen online from MakingStarWars.net would actually be Batuu, and it makes sense that Galaxy's Edge would be Batuu as well. All right. There's not a lot of tech that you usually see in a Star Wars movie. More hunter and gatherer type of group. Members of this group in the background are all seen smithing weapons and keeping busy in other ways. We're trying to keep under the nose of the First Order. The architecture is magnificent and will be a real visual treat for viewers. Now, Poe, Finn, and Chewbacca enter with other members of the Resistance and members of our group. They are greeted by Dom Monahan, who was wearing a very cool costume, and Naomi Ackie, Naomi Ackie is here as Veranada Calrissian. So Veranada Vera Calrissian. There is no mention of a formal leader, but they seem to be more in leadership roles. And we know that some of the behind-the-scenes footage on the side of a grassy knoll with the horses draped in pre-CGI costumes. Naomi Ackie is there, and the descriptions that the individual writes are very close to those, which can lend itself to him lifting his spoilers and making them up based off those behind-the-scenes pictures. That being said, he did go through the ringer, and there were several individuals and mods on the leaks board that felt that he was credible. Okay. Let's see here. They discuss a recent skirmish that happened while the Resistance arrived to the planet. They seem to be slightly at odds. Poe confronts Dom's character, and Dom laughs. He's a complex character, it would seem. He may have lost a friend or something in this skirmish. Naomi's character says they found something valuable at the cost of losing several soldiers. Enters an unaccompanied horse with several children masks on. Okay. A body is seated with a bag over their head. He gets dropped down, revealed to be a cowering General Hux, Domhnall Gleeson. He admits surrender and is searched by Dominic, who prods him with an instrument and taunts him. To Naomi's character's displeasure, this is near the end of Act 1. So I'm assuming this group of rebels joins Leia and the remaining Resistance, and the side characters are still around to face the First Order head-on during where they later filmed in Africa. Also, I have a friend who did a scene with Poe, Finn, and also Daisy. She has a lightsaber hilt on her belt. He goes on to say, I didn't want to get singled out, as I'm now worried this will catch on with Lucasfilm. The other scene is much longer and valuable as a piece of information. There's a speech, apparently, that Finn does. He says it isn't cheesy or uninspired. It's him taking on a leadership role. Finn raises a crystal, and as he raises the beacon in The Last Jedi, it's not like he raises it all the way over his head. I can't say how much all of this was audible or not, because that would make me more suspectable, but there's a little bit more to it. There's something about what Finn is saying that rallies the entire group to call to arms. It's like there's a new piece of lore that makes whatever he has and says important. It's supposed to solidify as a last chance for action. This is probably around a year or more after The Last Jedi, so that coincides with the other leaker. Let's see. Could be something of a MacGuffin. Okay. Green crystal. Interesting. Naomi is dressed as Vera. I keep saying her name weird. I want to say Vera. By Dom and Vera by Poe. She mentions her father is Commander Calrissian. Hux is in a dark costume, and he's a bit roughed up. His hair is messy. They've been on the road, not vehicles. There are bigger alien puppets and the horse creatures, which were just horses with CGI blankets on them. The bunker has large rocks, but there's lots of moss and greens. Some plants were purple. It was a huge bloody set. It's a big open underground base. BB-8 is there. There are a few other droids in the bunker. Did not see Rose. She may be hooded. Chewie is not on a horse. Okay, and I'm basically pulling these from a bunch of different comments that they made. He goes on to say, I think Hux, in his attempts to snuff out the remaining resistance, does not account for the numbers they've accumulated and is taken by surprise. Perhaps he wants to be there to see the resistance finally crushed. This could be why Dominic is upset. Their position may be compromised, and the First Order is thriving. I did not hear the words Kylo Ren once on the set. I think it's a good next step for his character. He went from a menacing dominant force to a kind of tool in The Last Jedi. He's not the big bad guy in 9, speaking of General Hux. He's a tool to advance the plot and introduce the main villain, whom I believe is Matt Smith, as a new leader of the Knights of Ren, and Richard E. Grant as a new Grand Moff type. Let's see. She comes in with swagger. This is Vera. She does not dress like Lando. She's not a smuggler and a suave gambler. She's a scavenger type, and this particular group has something the Resistance wants. When she's talking to Dom Monahan, they're negotiating as partner types, but both clearly have different intentions. Poe chimes in to Dom Monahan's at first displeasure and then sort of as a maniacal happy laugh. All of it is a three-way negotiation between Finn, Poe, Chewie, and I believe he roars something that may be added later in ADR. Vera and her Legion and Monahan and those who are more seasoned members of the clan. So from what I gather from all this, and there's a lot of, and it's hard to follow, I know, because I'm pulling this from Reddit leaks, but it sounds like the beginning part of the movie is Finn, Poe, and Chewbacca trying to go and rally support. And they need whoever is on Batuu and Calrissian and Vera, his I guess granddaughter, right? To help out. If it follows kind of this same line of that we got in Return of the Jedi, which I believe that it will, then this makes all the sense in the world. That we're probably going to get either the beginning portion or the middle portion of the film on this Batuu jungle-esque planet with a large base, leading into a grand finale, which I assume is going to be the biggest Star Wars space battle we've ever seen, and a final confrontation between Rey and Kylo Ren in some way, shape, or form. All right, a few more comments here before we wrap up the show from this particular poster. Finn has a crystal. does not indicate he can use the Force or has a lightsaber. He holds the green crystal prop. There's something more to it, I'm sure, but do not get excited for Finn as a Jedi. The crystal, however, is green, which is why, since that day, I'm thinking it's something related to Luke, the way The Last Jedi ended, Luke having his green saber in Return of the Jedi. So maybe I'm at fault for thinking this, but I really assumed. So the green crystal, and I'll let you comment, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or drop me a comment on the YouTube page if you think there could be some significance there. We don't know what happened to his green saber. We know that at the final confrontation in The Last Jedi, he force projected the legacy lightsaber. And they did that intentionally in the movie because they wanted to give some clues that Luke wasn't actually there, and it would not have made sense, obviously, for him to have the legacy saber. I know the first time I saw The Last Jedi, man, it completely threw me for a loop. All right, one more quick comment from this poster. He says this. I think this signals a return of Luke somehow, being there. I don't think the direction was to show that Finn is Force sensitive. It also doesn't align with how they've managed his character. We're supposed to be astonished. There's something else here that plays into the overall plot of the film. This is why I hesitated to post. Batuu is going to deliver. Okay. The cave set is incredible. It is likely the more urban environment that I recently saw from Disneyland is featured. I assume it goes Batuu, the Jordan set, and then the final planet where the war is waged and finalized. It's similar to the reveal of the base on Crate. Way busier, though. Big open set. There are markings all around like fake rocks and moss. So it would really appear to me that this poster is alluding to the fact that this set, this base on Batuu, is going to play a central role in the movie and probably be the staging area for the big bad at the end of the film. So there you go. And what do you think? Talkshownerd@gmail.com. Drop me a comment on YouTube and let me know what you think of these spoilers. Have you been to Reddit? Did you read these? Do you think they're legit? And do they get you at all excited for Episode 9 beyond the excitement that you already have? It all sounds really interesting to me. The idea of the crystal saber, Finn's more involvement, it already, to me, for as much as I love The Last Jedi, it already is having a bit more of this Return of the Jedi sort of feel. And to be completely honest, I am totally fine with Episode 9 having some very direct nods to Return of the Jedi in the same way that The Force Awakens was kind of a mashup of all the original trilogy movies, especially given the fact that of all the films, Return of the Jedi is one of my least favorite. It's got some really high highs, but the lows, are a little bit dull for me. And as a matter of fact, Knights of Vader, who again I'm going to be doing an interview with here next week. Really excited to be on with Zach and the guys again on Knights of Vader. I know that they had a show recently talking about Return of the Jedi. That's really, really interesting. I really got a kick out of it. So again, what do you think? Go and leave a comment on YouTube and drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And before I wrap up, again, I want to say thank you to everybody who's picked up the book, Embark. I'm really, really excited with the response that I've gotten so far. If you haven't done it yet, I really want to, not just because I want to sell books, I legitimately want people to read the story, because I think if you're a Star Wars fan, you really, really will enjoy it. You can't do Star Wars the way that George Lucas did. So I wanted to create something new, and this book is the world building that'll lead to the other stories. And like I mentioned, I already started, I wrote like 4,000, 5,000 words this weekend on the sequel, and I'm still working on the audiobook for Embark. So if you have picked it up, thank you so much. If you haven't, go to Amazon. The ebook is $2.99. The paperback is $13.99. I get a small cut of that. It's just the way that Amazon works. And it's available on Kindle Unlimited. I get page reads for that. And I really do think, as a Star Wars fan, you'll really, really enjoy it. And thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're done. Cutting a little bit short this week. I need to go watch the Vikings game. It's already started. And I need a break for the day anyways, because it's getting late in the day. So thank you so much for downloading the show. Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio is where you can find it. Subscribe. Again, leave me a comment. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is The Jon Justice. Twitter is The My Nerd World, or Jon Jon Justice, and Facebook is Jon Justice as well. Have yourself a fantastic week. I think we're getting a bunch of trailers this week. Marvel trailers, maybe another Captain America, and maybe another Avengers trailer. So hopefully that clears the way and we can get something for episode 9 before the end of the year. Talk to you again next week. May the Force be with you, and here's Obi-Wan to say the same thing. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.